The man in the wrong suit. It was raining in Mumbai. The sky was gray, heavy with sadness. Thunder rumbled like a warning. Sundar Pichai stepped out of the car, holding a small umbrella. The doorman at the Grand Orchid Hotel barely looked at him. Wore a simple black suit. It was clean, but not expensive. His shoes had a little dust on them. He pulled a small carry-on behind him. Nothing about him looked rich. Nothing, said CEO. Not today. Inside the lobby. Chandeliers sparkled above. Golden floors. Guests walked with pride. Some in designer clothes. Some with bodyguards. A woman in diamonds stared at Sundar like he didn't belong. He smiled politely. No one smiled back. He walked up to the reception desk. The receptionist looked up, then back down. Her voice was cold. Sir, this desk is for VIP guests only. No, Sundar said gently. I have a booking. She looked again, this time more closely. Still, her voice didn't change. Sir, this entrance is for special members. Regular guests check in at the side desk. I booked the presidential. Sweet, Sundar said. He showed his ID. She looked at it. Her face twisted a little. Then she handed the ID back quickly, as if it burned her hand. Just a moment, sir, she said. But behind her politeness there was doubt. Two men in suits whispered nearby. One laughed quietly. He thinks he can just walk in, one of them, said. Sundar heard them. He turned his head slightly, but said nothing. A tall manager came rushing over. He didn't greet Sundar. Instead, he looked straight at the receptionist. What's the issue? He says he booked the suite. She whispered. The manager turned to Sundar. His smile was tight. Sir, are you sure you're in the right hotel? Sundar nodded. Yes. Check the booking under my name. The manager sighed and typed something on the computer. He froze. His eyes flicked to Sundar, then back to the screen. Please wait here, he said, then disappeared into a back office. Sundar stood there, quiet. Guests walked around him like he was furniture. Minutes passed. A child dropped her toy near his foot. Sundar picked it up and handed it back with a kind smile. Thank you, uncle, the girl said. Her mother pulled her away. Looking embarrassed. Finally, the manager returned. This time his face had changed. Sir, I'm so sorry for the confusion. Your suite is ready. But the tone was still strange, forced, tense. A bellboy came forward to carry Sundar's small bag. He didn't hide his surprise. Just one bag, sir? He asked. Yes, Sundar replied. As they walked to the elevator. Sundar passed the two men in suits again. One of them said, just loud enough to hear, must be some kind of mistake. Maybe he knows someone here. Sundar didn't stop. He didn't turn, but something inside him shifted. The suite was beautiful. Walls of glass, a view of the sea. A gold-framed mirror reflected Sundar's tired face. He sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, checked his phone. There were missed calls, messages from Google headquarters, people needing answers, decisions. He didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the window and looked down at the city. Cars honked far below. People hurried under umbrellas. He thought of his childhood. Chennai, one small room, no running water. Black and white TV. His father working hard every day. His mother saving every rupee. He remembered walking barefoot to school when it rained. Remembered sharing one textbook with two friends. Remembered standing outside electronics shops just to see a color television. Now, here he was, in the most expensive suite of one of India's most luxurious hotels. And still, no one had seen him. Not really. They saw his suit, his bag, his skin. Not the man. He sat quietly, not angry, just thoughtful. Then, his phone rang. He picked it. A familiar voice came through. His old friend Anil, now a school principal. Sundar, he said, I know you're here. Something's wrong, isn't it? Sundar didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, I just want a new place to rest, but it seems even now I have to prove I belong. Anil was quiet. Then he said, come tomorrow. Come to the school. See the kids? They don't care about suits. They care about stories. Sundar smiled for the first time that day. I'll be there. He hung up. Looked in the mirror again. The man in the wrong suit. Maybe Dot, but he had one thing they didn't see: his story. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old coin, the one his father had given him long ago. It was scratched and dull, but he carried it everywhere. He closed his hand around it. Dot outside. The sky was still dark. Thunder rolled in the distance, but Sundar stood up, straightened his jacket, walked back to the lobby. He wasn't going to hide in his room. He wanted to see how deep the cracks went, and he was ready to face them. Asterisk, the echo of the past voice was sharp and loud, slicing through the quiet buzz of the luxury lobby like a stone dropped into still water. It echoed off the marble walls and made several guests turn their heads. Sundar stopped mid-step, his foot hanging in the air for half a second before it touched the floor again. His breath caught in his throat. Sundar Pichai. He turned slowly, unsure what he would see. His eyes searched the open space of the lobby until they landed on a figure near the entrance. A short man, wide-shouldered, dressed in expensive blue suit and wearing sunglasses indoors, was striding toward him. His shoes made clicking sounds that rang with confidence. Two men followed behind him, like shadows. The short man was smiling wide, too wide, but his eyes behind the glasses gave nothing away. Sundar blinked, confused for a moment. Then recognition flickered through his mind. It had been nearly 30 years, but the memory of that face hadn't faded. Ranjit, he said softly. R-N-J Tamira. The school bully, the boy who used to snatch lunch boxes, mock his accent, and call him Railway Boy, because Sundar's father worked in the railways and they lived near the tracks. Ranjit, who once poured ink into Sundar's school bag just to see him cry. Ranjit, who came from money, who once said Sundar would grow up to shine shoes outside his father's office. And now here he was, wearing a luxury watch, walking with bodyguards, and standing in the center of one of the most expensive hotels in the country. I thought it was you, Ranjit said, taking off his glasses and offering a handshake that felt more like a challenge. Look at you, all grown up. I almost didn't recognize you. Still wearing simple suits, I see. Sundar smiled politely, shook his hand, and said nothing. What are you doing here? Ranjit continued. Visiting? Or are you here for some tech seminar or something? Before Sundar could answer, the hotel manager returned, flustered, sweating slightly. Mr. Pichai, would you like your evening tea served in the suite or down here in the lounge? Ranjit's face twitched. He looked at the manager, then back at Sundar. Wait, he said slowly. You're staying here? The manager nodded. He's in the presidential suite. Ranjit's smile faded for just a moment, then reappeared like a mask, slipping back into place. Well, he said, laughing. Look at you. Seems the railway boy made it after all. Sundar didn't respond. He looked at Ranjit, not with anger, but with something else. A strange quiet. Not silence, but stillness. Like the calm before a storm. The manager excused himself. The two bodyguards stepped away to take a phone call. You know, Ranjit said, lowering his voice. When we were kids, I used to joke about you working at a chai stall. Imagine my shock when I heard your name in the news last year. Google. Who would have thought? You did, Sundar said softly. You thought I'd fail. Every day. The words weren't bitter. They were calm. Factual. A mirror held up to the past. Ranjit laughed again, but this time it was hollow. Come on, man. We were just kids. Kids are cruel sometimes. No hard feelings, right? Sundar nodded once. No hard feelings? But something inside him stirred. Not hatred. Not revenge. Just the weight he thought he had left behind. Ranjit clapped him on the shoulder. Listen, I'm hosting a private dinner here tonight. Business folks, investors. Why don't you drop by? Old friends catching up. Before Sundar could answer, Ranjit was already walking away. I'll send someone with the invitation. He called out, disappearing into a private elevator. Sundar stood still. The lobby seemed louder now. Voices, footsteps, clinking glasses. But in his head, there was only silence. He walked out of the hotel and into the night. The rain had stopped, but the streets were wet. His driver waited nearby, holding the door open. Sundar climbed in and asked him to drive to a small address on the other side of town. As the car moved through traffic, Sundar looked out the window at the city. Billboards, crowds, neon lights, people chasing dreams, people trying to survive. They passed the neighborhood where he grew up, the small lane, the tea stalls, the old post office. Nothing had changed, and yet everything was different. Finally, they arrived at the school. It was dark, except for a single light, and the principal's office. Anil was waiting. He opened the gate himself and smiled. When he saw Sundar, "You came. I needed to," Sundar replied. They sat in a tiny office, sipping chai from paper cups. On the wall were pictures of students, trophies, and a dusty blackboard with a quote written in chalk. "Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself." "You remember that time we all got punished for running in the corridor?" Anil asked, chuckling. Sundar smiled. "I do. We had to clean the whole classroom." "And you stayed back after everyone left." "You cleaned the teacher's desk too." "I didn't want her to trip on the ink someone spilled." Anil looked at him for a long moment. "You haven't changed." Sundar put his cup down. "That's the problem, isn't it? I haven't changed. Not enough for them." "What happened?" Anil asked. Sundar told him. Not just about the hotel. About the stairs. The whispers. The surprise in their eyes when they found out who he was. About Ranjit. Anil listened, his eyes growing sad. "You built one of the most powerful companies in the world," he said. "And they still judge you by your shoes." "Or my suit," Sundar added. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, dogs barked in the distance. A train horn sounded faintly, a memory from another life. Then Anil said, "You have a choice. Hide from them. Or walk right into that dinner and show them who you are." Sundar looked at him. "But why should I have to prove anything?" "You're not proving it to them," Anil replied. "You're proving it to that little boy who sat in the back of the class and believed one day he'd matter." Sundar looked away, his eyes wet. He wiped them quickly. He stayed at the school late into the night. He visited the classrooms, touched the old wooden benches, looked at the peeling paint. Memories flooded back, both joyful and painful. When he finally returned to the hotel, there was an envelope waiting for him at the door of his suite. Inside, a card read, "You are invited private dinner. 8 p.m. sharp dress code. Formal luxury only theater," was a handwritten note at the bottom. "Let's see if the CEO of Google still remembers how to shine." Ranjit held the card in his hand for a long time. Then he placed it on the table. He walked to the window and looked at the city lights. Something deep inside him began to shift. It was not anger, it was fire. Asterisk, the ballroom of masks. Chandeliers above the grand ballroom glowed like frozen fireworks. Golden light spilled over polished floors. Soft music floated through the air. And the scent of expensive perfume and roasted lamb clung to every breath. Every table shimmered with silverware, white roses, and name cards. Laughter rang from one corner, clinking glasses from another. But as Sundar Pichai stepped inside, everything stopped. It was not a gentle pause. It was the kind of silence that wrapped around the room like a fog, heavy and thick. People turned their heads. Forks hovered midair. A waiter froze with a tray of champagne in his hand. And then, from somewhere near the back, a voice rose loud, sharp, almost amused. "Who decided to join us?" The humble CEO himself. Sundar stood near the entrance, dressed in a charcoal gray suit. It was not shiny or loud. It didn't scream wealth. But it was cut with quiet elegance. Not expensive looking, but powerful in its simplicity. No tie, no watch. Just a man standing with nothing to prove. He turned toward the voice. Ranjit stood. Near a long table, surrounded by guests, men in dark suits, women in silk gowns. They were people of money, of position, of legacy. They were not used to feeling small. But as Sundar walked forward, heads turned again. Whispers began, thin as mist. Is that really him? He looks so ... normal. Does he even belong here? But Sundar didn't hurry. Each step was measured, steady, quiet. Not afraid. Simply dot dot dot. Present. Rainyard stepped forward, his arms wide, voice louder now. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the man who runs the world from his Sundar Pichai, the pride of Silicon Valley. There was polite laughter, too polite. Sundar could feel the temperature in the room, the way it changed with every glance. He felt like a guest in a place built to remind him that he wasn't one. Of them, a woman in pearls leaned toward her friend. I thought CEOs came with an entourage. A man in a velvet blazer whispered. He didn't even bring a partner. Maybe he's too busy to have a life. They didn't say these things to hurt him. They said them because they thought he couldn't hear. Or worse, they thought he wouldn't care. Sundar greeted Ranjit with a nod. Thank you for the invitation, Ranjit grinned. Of course, old friend. We're all curious to hear about your journey. Maybe you'll inspire us to become tech giants too. Again, the laughter. Again, the sting behind the smile. A waiter approached with a tray of wine. Sundar gently declined. Oh, come on, Ranjit said. Live a little. Even billionaires deserve a break. I already had my break, Sundar replied softly. It was called education. The room fell quiet again. Not because the line was clever, but because it was true. It cut through the velvet air like truth always does, clean and unexpected. Ranjit's smile twitched. Still the same old Sundar. Always with the smart words. And you, Sundar said, with no malice in his voice, still hiding behind the loud ones. Some people looked away. Some chuckled nervously. Some just stared. But Sundar didn't stay by Ranjit's side. He moved around the room, speaking to guests, answering questions with calm grace. He spoke about children in rural schools, about technology in villages, about how India didn't need more apps, it needed more access. As he spoke, something began to shift. One woman said, I didn't know Google was doing that. A man beside her whispered, he actually listens when you speak. People who had judged his shoes began to notice his eyes. Kind, sharp, alert. People who had dismissed his quiet suit began to lean in toward his voice. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. Then, as dessert was served and music resumed, an old man stood up at the far end of the room. His hair was white, his skin wrinkled, but his eyes were alive. He was a retired judge respected by all. He raised his glass. I have seen many men enter rooms like this, he said. Some came with fame, some with fortune. But very few entered with dignity. Tonight, we saw what true dignity looks like. His voice trembled slightly. When I was younger, he continued, I thought power came from position. Now I know it comes from purpose. He looked at Sundar. Thank you for reminding us. The room was silent again, but this time it was not uncomfortable. It was thoughtful, reflective. Something had shifted, but not for everyone. Ranjit was sitting at the bar now, a drink in his hand, his face dark. One of his friends leaned in. He's stealing your spotlight. Ranjit didn't answer. He simply stared at Sundar and then he did something unexpected. He stood up, walked back to the center of the room, clinked his glass with a spoon. Since we have such a rare guest, he said, smiling too wide again. How about a little fun? A question game. We ask, you answer. Honest answers only. Some people cheered. Others looked unsure. Sundar didn't move. Ranjit continued. Let's begin with something simple. Mr. Pichai, have you ever felt ashamed of your roots? The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone turned to Sundar. He looked around the room. At the polished floor, the heavy curtains, the chandeliers. Then he said, I used to be ashamed of the way people looked at my father. He wore a uniform, worked long shifts, and came home covered in sweat. People would look at him and think, he was less. He paused. But now, I look at that same man and realize he was more. He gave me books when he couldn't buy shirts. He taught me that silence is stronger than noise. So no, I have never been ashamed of my roots. I've only been ashamed that others couldn't see the strength in them. The room was completely silent. Ranjit smiled again, but it was thinner now, more fragile. He raised his glass again. Fair answer. Very poetic. Let's try another. But just as he opened his mouth, a voice from the entrance interrupted. Mr. Pichai, it said firmly. A security officer had entered, holding a tablet. The music stopped. We're so sorry to disturb your evening, the officer said, his tone suddenly respectful. But there's a situation that needs your attention. Sundar walked toward him. What happened? He asked. The officer looked serious. A video, he said. It's gone viral. Someone filmed part of your check-in yesterday. It shows. The staff ignoring you, guests laughing at you, ... and your full name on the booking screen. It's already got over 3 million views. Sundar's heart dropped for a second. People are angry. The officer continued. Some are calling it discrimination. Some are saying it's a lesson in humility. News channels are already reporting it. You're trending worldwide. Gasps echoed through the room. Some guests looked at each other in panic. Others stepped away from Sundar, as if he had suddenly changed form. He looked at the officer, then down at the tablet. The screen showed a frozen frame. Sundar, standing at the hotel desk, ignored, small, waiting. Then he heard Ranjit's voice behind him. Looks like you got your spotlight after all. But this time the words didn't sting, because something bigger had begun. Asterisk the man downstairs for a long moment. Sundar didn't move. The ballroom buzzed around him. Nervous murmurs, sideways glances, half-finished desserts trembling on silver spoons. The soft echo of the young staff member's voice still hung in the air. Someone downstairs, she had said, breathless, they say they used to know you, and they're crying. Sundar looked into her eyes. She was young, no older than 20. She wore the hotel uniform like a second skin neat pressed, emotionless, but her voice had cracked with urgency, and her hands were shaking slightly as if the emotion from downstairs had climbed its way up through the elevator. With her? Did they give a name? Sundar asked, voice calm. She shook her head. No, sir. Just said they had to see you. They kept repeating your name over and over. They looked broken. Sundar nodded once. Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the entrance of the ballroom. The whispers behind him grew louder as he passed. People moved out of his way like water parting for a quiet storm. Asterisk. Ranjit called out behind him with a smirk in his voice. Maybe another viral video waiting for you downstairs, CEO. But Sundar didn't turn. Not even once. He stepped into the elevator. The young staff member stood beside him, her eyes on the floor, as if unsure whether she was allowed to breathe in the same space. Sundar turned to her gently. What's your name? She looked up, surprised. Mega. He smiled. Thank you, Mega. Not everyone would have come to find me. She blushed slightly, nodded, and said nothing more. When the elevator doors opened to the lobby, the air was thicker than before, tenser. Hotel staff stood in corners, glancing sideways at Sundar as he walked by. Some had already seen the video, some were pretending they hadn't, and some deep down were remembering how they had treated him just a day before. But Sundar's eyes searched only for one thing, the man who waited. And he saw him. Slumped on a couch near the glass doors, wearing a faded green shirt and old slippers, gray hair, thin arms. His hands were shaking. Tears streamed silently down his face, leaving wet trails on sun-worn skin. Sundar froze. Time folded in on itself, because sitting there nearly unrecognizable, but still impossibly familiar, was Muthu, the old gatekeeper from Sundar's childhood. Street, the man who used to open the narrow iron gate to their tiny housing colony every morning, who carried a wooden stick more as tradition than threat, who smiled with broken teeth and gave Sundar boiled sweets when his father was late from work. The man who once carried Sundar home on his back when he sprained his ankle running barefoot to school. And now he looked like a man swallowed by time. Small, fragile, forgotten. Sundar walked over slowly. Muthu's eyes widened. Sundar, he whispered. Sundar boy, is it really you? Yes, Sundar said, kneeling in front of him. It's me. Muthu burst into sobs, his hand reaching out as if to prove this wasn't a dream. Sundar gently held them, the feeling. How thin they had become, how light. Muthu clutched Sundar's fingers like a lifeline. I saw you on the TV, he said between sobs. And then I saw that video. They treated you like nothing. I couldn't sleep. I came all the way here. I don't even know how I got here. I had to see you. Sundar nodded slowly. He could feel the sting behind his eyes, but he held steady. Why didn't you come before? Sundar asked softly. All these years. Shame, Muthu whispered. After your father passed, the colony was sold. My son moved away. I stayed behind, but work stopped. The factory closed. Then my health went, and what would I say if I found you? Look at me. I'm still poor. What would I bring you but bad memories? Sundar shook his head. You brought kindness and memories that saved me. Muthu looked confused. Sundar continued, his voice low but strong. When I walked to school hungry, I remembered your sweets. When classmates mocked me, I remembered how you called me little professor. When my father couldn't make it to my awards, I remembered how you clapped the loudest. Megha stood nearby now, hands clasped. Guests had begun to gather near. The stairs, curious. Even a few waiters had stopped to listen. Sundar looked up, aware of the attention, and then helped Muthu to his feet. Come, he said. You'll stay with me tonight. No, Muthu said, backing away. This place is too much. I don't belong here. Neither did I, Sundar said with a faint smile. But we'll belong together. He turned to the receptionist, the same one who had dismissed him just a day ago. Please prepare a second room near the presidential suite, Sundar said. The receptionist blinked, stunned. Yes, sir. As Muthu was led away gently by. Hotel staff, guests whispered again, but this time their voices carried something different. Not mockery, not judgment, but a kind of quiet awe. Because they had seen something rare, not a man showing off his power, but a man showing his past without shame. Ranjit watched from the mezzanine floor above, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable. Back in his suite, Sundar sat in silence. For a long time, he stared out the window. The city stretched below like a puzzle. He remembered how he had once stood at the same window, wondering whether he still belonged anywhere. And now, a tired old man from the past had walked into the present and reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. What we become does. Not erase where we came from. The video online had gone viral for all the wrong reasons. It had shown his humiliation, his discomfort. But now people were resharing it with new captions. This is what grace looks like. Never judge a man by his clothes. Humility is power. Overnight, messages poured in. Some from employees, some from journalists, some from strangers. But one message stood out, a short, quiet message from a teenage girl in a village school. Dear Sundar sir, they laughed at your simple beg. People laugh at mine too. Now I feel proud. Thank you. Sundar read it twice. Then 3 times. His phone buzzed again. A call this time. From Google headquarters. He didn't answer. Instead. He stood up and walked into the room where Muthu was resting. The old man was already asleep, wrapped in a hotel robe too large for him, snoring softly. A small plate of fruit had been left untouched beside the bed. Sundar pulled the blanket up gently and sat beside him. Just for a moment, he whispered into the silence. You never stopped protecting me. Not then, not now. Then he walked back into the main room, poured himself a glass of water, and turned off the lights. But sleep did not come easy, because somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't over. Asterisk the quiet storm. Morning light spilled gently into the hallway outside Sundar's suite. Golden streaks touched the carpet and painted the walls, softening the hard edges of the luxury hotel's polished perfection. But that soft light met a jarring scene, because standing just beyond the open door was a reporter. Her phone already recording, her voice urgent and clear. Mr. Pichai, she said, eyes wide, tone breathless. Are the rumors true? Did you refuse to leave the hotel until they apologized? And are you planning to sue them? For a heartbeat, Sundar said nothing. He stood in the doorway in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, holding a towel from washing his face moments earlier. His hair was still damp, his expression calm, but behind his eyes was a storm, not of anger, but of principle. The hallway was no longer private. Two more journalists stood behind the first. One held a mic. Another had a camera slung over his shoulder. Hotel staff appeared nervously around corners, unsure whether to intervene or hide. "We'll live on social media," the first reporter said, noticing the hesitation. "Millions are watching." Sundar slowly stepped outside the room and closed the door behind him, careful not to disturb Muthu, who was still sleeping. The air in the hallway felt thick now, like walking into a room where someone had been crying moments before. "What rumors?" Sundar asked, his voice steady, low. "That you're suing the hotel for discrimination. That you demanded all staff involved be fired. And that you plan to leave India early." Sundar looked at her. His eyes didn't flinch. There was no anger, no panic, just something deeper, a kind of disappointment. "Do you think that would fix anything?" He asked softly. The reporter paused, caught off guard. "Firing people," he continued, "won't teach them why they were wrong. Suing a building won't teach its owners how to build better spaces. And leaving early would only mean I never belonged in the first place." His words weren't rehearsed. They didn't ring like a press release. They felt lived. They felt true. The camera man lowered his lens slightly, as if embarrassed to record something so raw. Sundar turned toward the first reporter. "Do you know what humiliation is?" She didn't answer. "It's not about being ignored at a desk," he said. "It's not about a bellboy refusing to carry your bag. It's about the quiet decision someone makes when they see your skin, or your name, or your shoes, and they choose to believe you don't matter." His voice trembled slightly. "And the only way to end that," he said, "is not to punish, but to awaken." The hallway was silent now. The live stream was still rolling, but no one spoke. The comments online flooded in, hearts, crying emojis, angry faces, and somewhere among them, one small line stood out. "I wish my father could hear him speak." Sundar looked around. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to remind people that humility is not weakness. And kindness is not a performance. I don't need this hotel to apologize to me. I need them to apologize to every child who will walk through these doors in the future wearing sandals and carrying dreams." He gently stepped past the journalists and began walking down the hallway. They didn't follow. Later that morning, Sundar sat with Muthu on the hotel balcony. The old man wore sunglasses too big for his face and a fresh kurta provided by the hotel staff, likely in panic after the video storm. But he looked happier, more relaxed. "You always talked like this when you were young," Muthu said with a grin. Big words, small voice, but it reached people. Sundar smiled. "Sometimes it didn't, but I kept trying." They shared a quiet breakfast. Muthu told stories from the old colony, about neighbors who had disappeared, about boys who became fathers too early, about women who lit their stoves with dreams and debt. Sundar listened, his heart aching with each sentence, not just for what had been lost, but for how easily it had been forgotten. Sundar single quotes S phone buzzed again. His assistant was calling from California. News channels were requesting live interviews. The investors wanted clarity. Tech blogs wanted a statement. And quietly behind all of it, board members were beginning to worry, but Sundar didn't answer. Asterisk. Instead, he opened a notebook and began writing. Long lines. Quiet thoughts. Not a speech, not a statement. Just thoughts that felt like truth. That afternoon, a young intern from the hotel approached him shyly. "Sir," she said, "the general manager has requested a private meeting in the Rosewood conference rooms." Sundar nodded. Before leaving, he turned to Muthu. "Would you like to come?" The old man shook his head. "This is your storm. I'll be here when it's over." Sundar walked through the hallways, slowly. Guests looked up from their magazines. Staff members straightened their collars. Everyone knew who he was now, but what mattered more was how they looked at him. Not with pity, not with fear, but with the beginning of respect. Inside the Rosewood conference room, the manager stood waiting with two senior executives. They looked tired, nervous, polished within an inch of their dignity. Mr. Pichai, the manager began, we want to express our deepest regret. Sundar sat down without a word. We are conducting an internal review, the second man added. There will be retraining, restructuring, and, of course, compensation. Sundar held up his hand. Do you remember the girl who brought you water yesterday? He asked. They blinked, unsure. She was the only one who saw me, Sundar said. Before you knew who I was, before the headlines. She didn't see my shoes, or my suitcase. She saw my face. He paused. So, don't train your staff to memorize names. Train them to see people. The manager swallowed. We understand. Do you? Sundar asked. Because if you did, you know that no amount of apology can fix something if your hotel continues to be a mirror only for the rich. You must become a window too. They said nothing. I don't want money, Sundar said. I don't want revenge. I want you to build a scholarship program for hospitality students from underprivileged families, fully funded, nationwide. The executives glanced at each other. We'll discuss it. No, Sundar said. You'll do it, or I'll fund it myself. And name it after the man who taught me what dignity looks like. They leaned forward. Who? Sundar stood up. Muthu. He said. Your old gatekeeper would have called him, sir. He walked out of the room before they could answer. That evening, Sundar and Muthu took a walk along the beach near the hotel. The sky was painted in orange and ash. Waves came in like memories, soft, endless, unfinished. You think they'll change? Muthu asked. Some will, Sundar said. And that's enough. And the others? Sundar looked out over the water. They'll hear the silence we left behind. Asterisk, the last lesson. Black car rolled to a quiet stop beside the beach promenade. The window lowered inch by inch, slow and deliberate, like time revealing a secret. Sundar stopped walking. Muthu paused beside him, squinting at the vehicle. Sea wind brushed across their faces. A few hotel staff in the distance turned toward the car, whispering, recognizing the symbol on the door silver. Under stated expensive dot behind the tinted glass was a face Sundar hadn't seen in decades. His breath caught, not because of fear, but because the past had finally caught up, sitting there, dressed in a linen shirt and with a neatly trimmed beard. It was Arun Pichai, Sundar's estranged elder cousin, the cousin who had once been a mentor, then a rival, then nothing. Their last conversation had ended in silence. Years ago, at their grandmother's funeral, Arun had made a quiet remark about how Sundar had forgotten who he was, about how America had taken the boy out of India and the humility out of the boy. The words had sliced deep. Not because they were cruel, but because in that moment, Sundar wasn't sure if they were true. Now, Arun looked older. Not just in his face, but in his posture, his presence. He didn't smile. He simply opened the door and said, "Get in. We need to talk." Sundar looked at Muthu, who gave a small nod, as if saying, "Go on." Some things have waited too long. Inside the car. The silence was thick. They drove slowly along the coastal road, windows up. The world outside moving in quiet waves of color. Arun spoke first. I saw the video, saw your speech. The hotel's apologizing to everyone now. Sponsors are pulling out. And people are saying, you've changed how leaders should act. Sundar said nothing. Arun turned slightly. You know, when we were kids, I used to be proud of you. You were quiet, but you always saw things I missed. I'd get the applause, you'd get the truth. Sundar looked at him now. Really looked? Then why did you disappear? He asked quietly. Arun sighed. Because I was jealous. Because when you got into Stanford, and I didn't, something in me cracked. I told myself you forgot us. But the truth is, I couldn't bear watching someone from my own street rise so far, while I stayed stuck in a job I hated. The confession landed between them like a stone in still water. Neither spoke for a while. Then Arun continued, voice softer now. But seeing you carry that old man out of the hotel yesterday, seeing you speak without anger, without pride, that broke something else in me. He turned to face Sundar completely. It reminded me that humility doesn't shrink a man. It expands him. The car pulled over near a cliff where the sea crashed below. Arun reached into the glove box and pulled out an envelope. This is for you, he said. It's not money. It's our grandmother's journal. I found it last year, hidden behind the prayer shelf. There's a page about you, about how she believed you changed the world without ever raising your voice. Sundar took the envelope with trembling hands. She always believed in both of us, Arun said. I just took longer to believe in myself. They sat in silence. Again, then Arun said the words Sundar never expected to hear. I'm proud of you, not because you became CEO. Not because of Google, but because even when the world tried to define you by suits, rooms, and titles, you stayed kind. Sundar's throat tightened, not with tears, but with release. Some weights don't scream when they fall. They simply vanished out back at the hotel. Muthu was sitting in the lobby with Megha, the young staff member who had first brought Sundar the message. They were laughing about something. The contrast between their ages was striking, one just beginning her journey, the other having already walked through the fire of decades, but their laughter connected them like a bridge. Sundar walked up to them and crouched beside Muthu. How would you like to visit Chennai with me? He asked. You blinked, confused. Chennai? Yes, Sundar said. I want to visit our old street, the Broken Gate, the shop that sold stale biscuits. Maybe even the tree you used to sleep under when power cuts made the nights unbearable. Muthu smiled slowly. You remember all that? I never forgot, Sundar replied. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the city skyline, the hotel held a quiet ceremony in the garden. Not for publicity, not for repair, but because someone, perhaps the general manager, perhaps Megha, had understood. A small stage had been set up with a single chair. Muthu was invited to sit there. Behind him stood a new plaque. The dignity of hospitality lies in seeing every guest as family. Inspired by the life and kindness of Muthu, guardian of dreams. Staff stood in uniform, eyes wide and respectful. Guests from around the world gathered, holding phones, not to record, but to remember. Sundar stood at the side, watching, not needing to speak, not needing to be seen. Megha stepped forward and placed a garland around Muthu's neck. The old man cried openly, smiling through it. It was the first time, perhaps in his entire life, that the world had paused to say thank you, and the world kept watching. Not just in that garden, but on millions of screens, because Sundar's story had traveled. A story not about technology, or power or wealth. But about how a man, dressed simply, carrying a small bag, entered a place built to ignore him and left it changed forever. The next morning, Sundar checked out of the hotel. He walked to the reception desk and smiled at the same woman who once doubted him. This time, she stood up. She looked into his eyes, and with genuine warmth, she said, "Thank you for showing us what leadership really means." Sundar nodded. Double quotes. Thank you for remembering what respect really is. He turned to leave. Muthu was waiting by the car, holding a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photo of Sundar standing beside him in the hotel hallway. The headline read, "He came in unnoticed. He left unforgettable." They drove away slowly.